Hey everyone, tonight we're diving into something that might keep you up for all the wrong reasons. But don't worry, dim the lights, maybe light a candle for that gentle glow, and let's walk together through the shadowy corridors of medieval medicine. You're about to discover why a simple lump could mean your world was about to end. You wake up in your straw-filled bed on a cold morning in 1347. The rooster hasn't even crowed yet, but something's wrong. There's a hard lump under your arm that wasn't there yesterday. It's about the size of a walnut, and when you press it, pain shoots through your shoulder like lightning. The rough wool of your tunic scratches against it as you sit up, and you wince. Your cottage is dark except for the dying embers in the hearth. Listen to the soft crackling of the last burning log. The air smells like smoke, unwashed bodies, and something else. Something you can't quite place. Fear, maybe. It tastes metallic on your tongue, like you've been sucking on a copper coin. But first, you need to understand what this lump means in your world. There's no WebMD to consult, no doctor you can call. Hell, there's barely a doctor within 50 miles. And even if there was, you couldn't afford one. Your monthly income is about what someone today spends on coffee in a week. You touch the lump again. It's firm, immovable, like a stone buried under your skin. In 2024, you'd probably Google lump underarm and either panic or book a doctor's appointment. But you're living in an age where people think illness comes from bad air, angry gods, or too much yellow bile in your system. The morning light starts to creep through the gaps in your wooden shutters. You can hear your neighbour, Thomas the Miller, already starting his day. His grinding stone makes that familiar scraping sound that usually comforts you. Today it sounds like bones being crushed. You try to convince yourself it's nothing. Maybe you slept wrong, maybe it's just a swollen gland from that cold you had last month. People get lumps all the time, right? Most of them go away on their own. But deep down, in that part of your brain that evolution gave you to detect danger, you know this is different. Wait, this gets worse. Much worse. Medieval people aren't stupid. They know about lumps that grow and spread. They have words for it. Canker, wolf, the gnawing sickness. What they don't have is any real understanding of what causes it or how to treat it. To them, cancer is literally evil incarnate, a demon eating you from the inside out. You pull on your boots, rough leather things that your father made, stitched with sinew and held together with hope. The leather is cold and damp from last night's rain. Everything in your world is cold and damp. Central heating won't be invented for another 600 years. As you step outside, the morning air hits your face like a slap. It's that bone-deep cold that makes your teeth ache. The ground beneath your feet is a mixture of mud, straw, and things you don't want to think about. Medieval villages don't have sewage systems. They have creative solutions. The lump throbs with each heartbeat. It's growing. You can feel it. Imagine if your phone started showing a crack in the screen that grew bigger every time you looked at it, and you had no idea how to fix it or where to get help. That's where you are right now, except instead of a phone, it's your body. You need to tell someone. But who? Your wife died in childbirth 2 years ago. Your children, well, child mortality rates in medieval times hover around 50%. You're alone with this growing terror under your skin. The village is starting to wake up. Smoke rises from chimneys like grey prayers ascending to an indifferent heaven. Dogs bark in the distance. A baby cries somewhere. Life goes on, oblivious to the fact that yours might be ending. But what happens next will change everything you think you know about survival. 3 days later, the lump has doubled in size. It now feels like someone shoved a chicken egg under your armpit and forgot to take it out. The pain has spread down your arm and up into your neck. You can barely lift your axe to chop wood, and winter is coming whether you're ready or not. You've made a decision that might kill you faster than the lump itself. You're going to see Agnes the wise woman. Agnes lives on the outskirts of the village in a cottage that smells like herbs, death, and secrets. She's the closest thing your community has to a doctor, which is like saying a paper airplane is the closest thing you have to a Boeing 747. But when you're drowning, you'll grab any rope thrown your way. The walk to her cottage takes 20 minutes through a forest that seems to whisper warnings. Medieval forests aren't the managed, safe hiking trails of today. They're full of wolves, bandits, and things that go bump in broad daylight. The path is barely visible, worn smooth by desperate feet like yours. You knock on her door with your good arm. The sound echoes hollow, like knocking on a coffin lid. When Agnes opens the door, you're struck by how small she is. Maybe 5 feet tall, bent with age, but her eyes are sharp as freshly forged steel. She looks at you the way a hawk looks at a mouse. "Show me," she says without preamble. No hello, no how are you feeling, straight to business. You lift your tunic and expose the lump. Agnes takes one look and her face goes white as fresh snow. In the candlelit darkness of her cottage, surrounded by hanging bundles of dried herbs that look like hanged men in the flickering light, she delivers your death sentence with medieval efficiency. "Wolf," she whispers. "The gnawing wolf has found you." The word hits you like a physical blow. Wolf. That's what they call the kind of sickness that eats you alive from the inside. Today we'd call it cancer. But to medieval minds, it's literally a beast devouring your flesh. The metaphor is so perfect, it's terrifying. Listen to the sound of dried herbs rustling in the draught from the door. Agnes moves around her cottage like a ghost, gathering things. Powders, liquids, objects you can't identify into the dim light. The air is thick with the smell of lavender, rosemary, and something earthy and deep, like freshly dug graves. "How long?" you ask, and your voice sounds strange, like it's coming from someone else's throat. Agnes shrugs. It's the kind of gesture that contains lifetimes of watching people die. Could be months, could be weeks. The wolf decides when it's finished feeding. She hands you a small cloth bag filled with herbs. Boil these in wine and drink the liquid 3 times a day. It might slow the wolf down or it might do nothing. The wolf is hungry and you're the feast. You want to ask her about treatments, about surgery, about anything that might save you. But this is 1347. The most advanced surgical procedure available is amputation with a saw and a prayer. Cancer surgery? That's not just impossible. It's literally inconceivable. Agnes accepts your payment. 3 copper coins and a promise to send someone to fix her roof before winter. It's more than you can afford, but what else are you going to spend money on? A longer life to enjoy it? But first, you need to understand what Agnes actually knows about your condition. Medieval healers like Agnes operate on a medical system that's part Greek philosophy, part Christian mysticism, and part desperate improvisation. They believe your body contains 4 humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Cancer is thought to be caused by an excess of black bile, which makes the body literally rot from within. The treatment Agnes gave you. It's designed to heat your body and drive out the cold, wet humours that feed the wolf. The herbs include things like wormwood and feverfew, plants that we now know have some anti-inflammatory properties, but calling it medicine is like calling a paper airplane aviation technology. As you walk home, the bag of herbs clutched in your good hand, you realise that Agnes just did something no modern doctor would do. She told you exactly how long you have to live and exactly how little she can do about it. There's a brutal honesty in medieval medicine that our modern bedside manner has lost. The lump throbs in rhythm with your footsteps. Each pulse feels like the wolf taking another bite. You pass the church where Father Benedict will soon ring the bells for evening prayers. The stone building looms against the darkening sky like a promise or a threat, depending on how you look at it. You wonder if you should go in, confess your sins, prepare your soul for whatever comes next. But something stops you at the church door. Maybe it's pride, maybe it's denial, maybe it's the simple human refusal to accept that this is how your story ends. What you don't know yet is that your real battle is just beginning. A week passes, and the wolf has invited its friends to dinner. You now have lumps in your neck, under your other arm, and a growing mass in your belly that makes eating feel like swallowing stones. Agnes's herbs have done exactly nothing, except make your urine smell like an apothecary's workshop. You're sitting by your fire, trying to stay warm with wood you can barely chop, when your neighbour Thomas arrives with news that changes everything. There's a surgeon in the next town over, a real surgeon who studied at the university in Paris. He can cut the wolf out of you. The hope that floods through your chest is almost painful. It's like stepping into sunlight after months in a cave. Thomas tells you the surgeon has saved dozens of people, that he has special tools and knowledge that make Agnes look like a child playing with dolls. But then comes the part that makes your heart sink faster than a stone in a well. The surgeon wants 50 silver pieces for the operation. That's more money than you'll see in 5 years of good harvests. It's the cost of a small house, a team of oxen, or a dowry for a merchant's daughter. Imagine someone telling you they can save your life, but it'll cost you your life savings, your house, and your children's future combined. Then multiply that by 10. That's what 50 silver pieces means to someone like you. You spend the next 3 days trying to figure out how to get the money. You could sell everything you own, but that wouldn't come close. You could borrow from the local lord, but that would mean indenturing yourself and any future children to work his lands forever. You could steal it, but medieval justice systems have creative ways of dealing with thieves that make dying of cancer look pleasant. Wait, this story gets darker. You decide to visit the surgeon anyway, just to see him, to understand what you're missing. The journey takes 2 days on foot through countryside that looks like God started painting a landscape and got distracted. Rolling hills, scattered forests, and the occasional village huddled around its church like chicks around a hen. The surgeon's house is the finest building you've ever seen. 2 stories of actual stone with glass windows that catch the sunlight like captured fire. The front door is oak so thick it could stop an army. This is what 50 silver pieces builds. Not just medical knowledge, but a fortress against the suffering of ordinary people. When you finally meet Master Guillaume, he's exactly what you expected and nothing like you hoped. He's tall, clean, and speaks with the kind of accent that comes from never having to worry about your next meal. His hands are soft as a baby's bottom, which is either reassuring or terrifying depending on how you look at it. He examines your lumps with the detachment of someone inspecting fruit at a market. His fingers probe and press while you try not to cry out. The examination takes less than 5 minutes, and his diagnosis is swift and brutal. Advanced wolf sickness, he announces in Latin first, then translates for your peasant ears. The beast has made multiple dens in your body. I could remove some of them, but... He shrugs with the casual indifference of someone delivering weather reports. But what, you ask, though you already know you won't like the answer. But the wolf will return. It always does. I might buy you months, perhaps a year. The operation will be unpleasant and expensive. Listen to the sound of coins clinking as he counts them in his mind. Master Guillaume explains the procedure in detail that makes your knees weak. No anesthesia beyond strong wine and leather to bite down on. No sterilization beyond washing his tools in boiled water. No antibiotics to prevent the infection that kills half his patients anyway. The surgery would involve cutting you open while you're conscious and screaming, removing as much of the wolf as he can find, then sewing you back together and hoping for the best. The survival rate is about 30%. Of those who survive, most die within 6 months when the wolf comes back hungrier than before. Master Guillaume offers you a deal that's both generous and cruel. He'll perform the surgery for 30 silver pieces instead of 50, and you can pay him after the harvest if you survive that long. It's the medical equivalent of a payday loan from someone who knows you'll probably be dead before the first payment is due. You walk home in a daze that has nothing to do with the distance travelled, and everything to do with the weight of impossible choices. The autumn air bites at your exposed skin, and you pull your cloak tighter. Soon winter will come, and you wonder if you'll live to see spring. But the wolf doesn't wait for your decision. It's growing stronger every day, and time is running out faster than water through a broken bucket. You return to your village with Master Guillaume's offer echoing in your head like a church bell that won't stop ringing. 30 silver pieces to maybe live 6 more months. It's the worst deal in the history of commerce, and you're seriously considering it because the alternative is waiting for the wolf to finish its meal. But first, let me tell you exactly what passes for medical science in your world. If you think WebMD gives you terrifying diagnoses based on minimal information, wait until you hear about medieval medicine. Everything wrong with your body comes down to 4 fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. These humours need to be perfectly balanced, like a recipe where too much salt ruins the entire dish. Your cancer. That's obviously too much black bile making your body cold and wet, which lets the wolf take root and grow. You're lying on your straw mattress, feeling the lumps under your skin like stones in a bag, when Father Benedict arrives for one of his pastoral visits. He's a thin man who always looks like he's apologising for existing, but his eyes light up when he starts talking about divine medicine. The Lord sends illness to test our faith, he explains, settling onto your only chair with a creak that makes you worry about the furniture. Your wolf is a demon that feeds on sin. Confession and penance will starve the beast. The priest's breath smells like communion wine and desperation. He genuinely believes that your moral failings have literally manifested as tumours. In his worldview, cancer is God's way of showing everyone what sinfulness looks like when it grows unchecked. Listen to the wind howling outside your cottage. It's getting colder every day, and winter in medieval times isn't the cosy season of hot chocolate and fireplaces. It's a months-long siege where half the village might not survive to see spring. Having cancer during medieval winter is like being shot while drowning in a hurricane. Father Benedict pulls out a small vial of what he claims is holy water blessed by the Pope himself. The liquid inside looks suspiciously like regular water, but it supposedly has the power to drive demons from diseased flesh. He dabs it on your forehead and mutters Latin words that sound impressive and mean absolutely nothing for your condition. Fast for 3 days, he instructs. Eat only bread and drink only water. Deprive the demon of the rich foods that feed its hunger. You want to laugh, but it comes out as a cough that tastes like copper and despair. Fasting when you're already wasting away from cancer is like treating a house fire by removing the roof. But this is what passes for spiritual medicine in 1347. Medieval doctors have elaborate theories about why you're sick, and they're all completely wrong. They believe your cancer started because you ate too much meat during Lent 3 years ago, or because you looked at a lunar eclipse without proper protection, or because you had impure thoughts about the baker's daughter. But here's what makes it even worse. Sometimes their treatments actually work, just not for the reasons they think. Agnes the wise woman returns the next day with a new treatment plan that makes Master Guillaume's surgery look reasonable by comparison. She's consulted with other healers, read signs in bird flights, and examined your urine under different phases of the moon. Her new diagnosis is both specific and terrifying. The wolf entered through your left foot, she announces with the confidence of someone reading from a medical textbook. There's a small scar there from when you stepped on a nail last summer. Demons always enter through wounds. You look down at your foot. There is indeed a tiny scar from that nail, now healed over and forgotten. In Agnes's medical system, this makes perfect sense. Demons need doorways, and open wounds are like leaving your front door unlocked in a bad neighbourhood. Her new treatment involves something called sympathetic magic. Since the wolf is a beast, you need to fight it with other beasts. She produces a bag containing powdered wolf bone, bear tooth, and what she claims is ground unicorn horn but looks suspiciously like regular deer antler. Mix this with strong wine and drink it while standing naked under the full moon, she instructs. The wolf spirits in the powder will fight the wolf in your body. The logic is ironclad if you ignore everything we know about biology, chemistry, and basic reality. Medieval medicine operates on the principle that like cures like, opposites balance each other, and God really, really cares about your bodily fluids. What terrifies you isn't just that these treatments won't work, it's that everyone, the priest, the healer, the surgeon, that speaks with complete certainty about things they clearly don't understand. It's like getting GPS directions from someone who's never left their hometown and doesn't know what a map is. But wait, it gets stranger. Much stranger. 2 weeks have passed since your visit to Master Guillaume, and the dwarf has been busy renovating your body without permission. The lump in your belly now feels like you've swallowed a small watermelon. You can barely keep food down, and what little you manage to eat tastes like ash mixed with regret. Agnes arrives at your cottage with a new plan that makes her previous treatments look like gentle suggestions. She's brought Thomas the barber with her, and he's carrying a leather bag that clinks ominously when he sets it down. Medieval barbers don't just cut hair, they're also surgeons, dentists, and professional bloodletters. It's like going to Starbucks and finding out they also perform appendectomies. The wolf is full of poisoned blood, Agnes explains while Thomas unpacks his tools. We need to drain the bad humours before they corrupt your entire body. Thomas produces a collection of metal instruments that look like they were designed by someone who confused medical treatment with medieval torture. There are curved blades for making precise cuts, bronze cups for catching blood, and a small brazier for heating the cups until they're hot enough to burn skin. The procedure is called cupping, and it's based on the revolutionary medical theory that sucking blood out through your skin will somehow cure cancer. It's like trying to fix a broken engine by draining the oil, except the engine is your body and the oil is literally keeping you alive. Thomas lights the brazier right there in your cottage, and soon the air fills with smoke that makes your eyes water. He heats several bronze cups until they're glowing like tiny suns, then quickly places them on your back after making small cuts with his knife. The hot cups create suction that draws your blood out through the wounds. The pain is indescribable. Imagine someone pressing hot coals against your back while simultaneously trying to pull your spine out through your skin. You bite down on a leather strap to keep from screaming and alerting the entire village that you're being medically tortured. Listen to the sound of blood dripping into the cups. Each drop represents a piece of your life force that medieval medicine believes is poison. They're literally bleeding you while cancer is already killing you, which is like throwing water on a drowning man to help him breathe. But Thomas isn't finished. After the cupping, he produces a handful of fat black creatures that make your skin crawl just looking at them. Leeches, medical leeches that he keeps in a jar like pets, except their job is to attach themselves to your body and suck your blood until they're fat and happy. Leeches know exactly how much bad blood to remove, Thomas explains while the slimy creatures attach themselves to your arms and neck. They won't take too much, unlike manual bleeding. You lie there feeling like a human juice box while a dozen leeches have the feast of their lives. The sensation is worse than the pain. It's the creeping, crawling knowledge that parasites are literally drinking your life while everyone around you nods approvingly. Medieval medical theory says leeches can sense the difference between good blood and bad blood, which is about as scientifically accurate as saying unicorns can diagnose diabetes by the colour of your dreams. But you're too weak to argue. And besides, what's your alternative? Wait for the wolf to finish eating you from the inside? After an hour that feels like a day in hell, Thomas removes the leeches and bandages your wounds with strips of cloth that probably haven't been washed since the Crusades. You've lost about a pint of blood, which is roughly equivalent to donating blood while running a marathon with the flu. But the medieval medical experience isn't complete without addressing your digestive humours. Agnes produces a bottle of liquid that looks like muddy water and smells like a stable after a long summer day. "Purgative," she announces cheerfully. "This will clean out all the corrupted bile that's feeding your wolf." The purgative is a mixture of herbs designed to make you evacuate your bowels with the force and frequency of a medieval siege engine. The theory is that cancer is caused by corrupt matter festering in your intestines, so the solution is to flush everything out until you're running on empty. What follows is 12 hours of intestinal rebellion that makes food poisoning look like a minor inconvenience. You spend more time in the outdoor privy than in your actual house, while your body expels everything it's ever eaten going back to childhood. It's like your digestive system has decided to quit its job and leave without giving notice. By the end of the treatment, you've lost blood, fluids, and whatever dignity you had left. You're weaker than a newborn kitten and about as useful. The lumps haven't shrunk even slightly, but everyone assures you that the treatment is working because you look appropriately miserable. "The wolf is fighting back," Agnes observes with satisfaction. "That means we're winning." It's the kind of logic that could convince you that jumping off a cliff is flying, right up until you hit the ground. But wait until you hear about their surgical techniques. 3 days after the bloodletting and purging, you've made a decision that will either save your life or end it more quickly than the wolf planned. You're going to sell everything you own to pay Master Guillaume for surgery. Your cottage, your tools, your few pieces of furniture, even your winter cloak. All of it together might buy you 30 silver pieces and a chance to wake up from the operation. The journey back to Master Guillaume's stonehouse feels like walking to your own execution. Every step sends lightning bolts of pain through your swollen body. The lumps have grown so large that your tunic no longer fits properly, and you can feel them shifting under your skin like restless animals. Master Guillaume greets you with the enthusiasm of a merchant who's just made an unexpectedly profitable sale. He examines your lumps again, nodding approvingly at how much they've grown since your last visit. "Excellent," he murmurs, which seems like exactly the wrong response to your deteriorating condition. "The wolf has made itself visible. Much easier to cut out when I can see exactly where it's hiding." He leads you to a room behind his main hall that looks like a cross between a kitchen and a battlefield medical station. There's a wooden table stained dark with substances you don't want to identify, shelves lined with metal instruments that gleam in the candlelight, and braziers for heating tools until they're red hot. The surgical tools look like they were designed by someone who confused healing with warfare. There are knives of various sizes, saws for cutting through bone, forceps for grasping slippery things, and needles thick as small nails for sewing people back together. Everything is made of iron or bronze, and nothing looks particularly clean by modern standards. Master Guillaume explains the procedure while laying out his instruments like a chef preparing for an elaborate meal. He'll cut open the skin over each lump, remove as much of the wolf as he can see and feel, then cauterize the wounds with hot iron to stop the bleeding and burn away any remaining demon essence. "The pain will be significant," he admits with the casual tone of someone discussing the weather. but pain is how we know the demon is being driven out. The more it hurts, the more successful the treatment. It's the kind of medieval logic that makes suffering a medical necessity rather than an unfortunate side effect. Your screams will literally be proof that the surgery is working. Listen to the sound of metal scraping against stone as Master Guillaume sharpens his knives. Each scrape echoes in the small room like a countdown to disaster. He tests the sharpness by slicing through a piece of parchment with the satisfied nod of a craftsman who takes pride in his tools. The Anesthesia consists of strong wine mixed with poppy juice, basically medieval morphine that's about as effective as modern alcohol for major surgery. You drink enough to make your head spin, but not nearly enough to make the coming ordeal bearable. Medieval patients don't get unconscious during surgery. They get drunk and bite leather while remaining fully aware of everything being done to them. 2 assistants arrive to hold you down during the operation. They are large men with gentle faces and strong hands, the medieval equivalent of surgical nurses whose main job is preventing patients from thrashing around while being cut open. They position themselves at your arms and legs with the practiced efficiency of people who've done this many times before. Master Guillaume begins with the largest lump, the one under your right arm that's grown to the size of a goose egg. He makes the first cut with a smooth, confident motion that sends fire racing through your entire body. The pain is so intense that your vision goes white around the edges, and you understand why they gave you leather to bite down on. Blood flows freely as he cuts deeper, probing with his fingers to find the edges of the tumour. Medieval surgery is more like exploration than precision. He's essentially digging around inside your body, trying to separate cancerous tissue from healthy flesh without being able to see clearly what he's doing. "Ah, there's the beast," he mutters as his fingers encounter the firm mass of the tumour. Slippery creature. This is why the wolf is so dangerous. It hides among the good flesh, pretending to belong. The removal process is exactly as brutal as you feared. Master Guillaume cuts and pulls, trying to extract the entire tumour without leaving pieces behind that could regrow. Every movement sends shockwaves of pain through your body that make you understand why some patients simply die from shock during medieval surgery. When he finally removes the lump, it looks disappointingly small and ordinary for something that's been ruling your life with terror. Just a mass of diseased tissue about the size of a plum, sitting in a metal bowl like an accusation. This tiny thing has been eating you alive for months, but the surgery isn't finished. Master Guillaume still has to deal with the other lumps. And then comes the cauterization, pressing red-hot iron against your open wounds to seal them shut and purify the area with fire. The smell of burning flesh fills the room, and you realise with detached horror that it's your own body creating that nauseating odour. By the time Master Guillaume finishes, you've lost more blood than you can afford and screamed yourself hoarse despite the leather bit. The wounds are sealed with hot iron and stitched shut with thick thread, but infection is almost guaranteed in an age without proper sterilisation. "Sleep now," Master Guillaume instructs as his assistants carry you to a small room where surgical patients recover. The wolf is gone, but your body needs time to heal the battleground. What he doesn't tell you is that medieval surgical patients have about a 50% chance of dying from infection within 2 weeks, and those who survive often discover that the wolf has simply moved to a new location and started building fresh dens. But right now, lying on a straw mattress with your body wrapped in bandages that smell like herbs and hope, you're still alive. And sometimes, in medieval times, still alive is the closest thing to victory you can achieve. You survive Master Guillaume's surgery, which puts you in the lucky 30% who don't die from infection, shock, or medieval medical care. But survive is a relative term when you're living with bandages that smell like rotting meat and wounds that weep constantly despite the cauterization. 3 weeks later, you can barely walk from your bed to your door without stopping to rest. The surgical wounds are healing, sort of, but new lumps are appearing faster than mushrooms after rain. The wolf wasn't killed by Master Guillaume's blade, it was just temporarily inconvenienced. Now it's back with friends, family, and what feels like an entire pack of relatives. Agnes arrives at your cottage with a bundle of herbs so large she looks like a walking haystack. Word has reached her about experimental treatments from the far corners of the known world, remedies so exotic and expensive that they make Master Guillaume's surgery look like a bargain. "There's a merchant just returned from Constantinople," she explains while unpacking plants you have never seen before. "He brings medicines from the land of the Saracens, healers who know secrets lost to Christian lands. The herbs smell like distant countries and desperate hope. There's frankincense from Arabia, saffron worth more than gold, and something called dragon's blood that looks like dried red tears. Each ingredient costs more than you used to make in a month. But what's money when you're shopping for your life? Medieval medicine might be primitive, but it's surprisingly international. Treatments travel along the same trade routes as silk and spices, carrying medical knowledge from Islamic scholars who preserved Greek texts, while Europe was busy forgetting how to read. Unfortunately, most of this knowledge gets filtered through layers of translation, superstition, and medieval logic that turns science into alchemy. Agnes brews a tea from the exotic herbs that smells like perfume mixed with medicinal desperation. The liquid is deep red, almost black, and when you drink it, your mouth burns like you've swallowed liquid fire. Each sip costs about what a farmer makes in a week, and you're drinking your children's inheritance one gulp at a time. The Saracen healers say cancer is fire-consuming water in the body, Agnes explains, while you try not to cough up the expensive remedy. This tea adds water to douse the flames and earth to starve. The fire. It's a completely different medical theory from the Christian humour system, but it's equally wrong about how cancer actually works. You're essentially paying premium prices for the exotic wrongness, which is like buying a luxury car that only drives backwards. But wait, there's more. Much more. Agnes produces a small leather pouch containing what she claims is the most powerful cancer remedy known to medieval medicine. Powdered emerald mixed with ground pearls and unicorn horn. The emerald is supposed to draw poison from the body, the pearls add purity, and the unicorn horn, well, unicorn horn supposedly cures everything. The powder costs more than most people see in a lifetime, and you're supposed to mix it with wine and drink it while reciting specific prayers during the full moon. It's the medieval equivalent of betting your life savings on a lottery ticket, except the lottery is run by people who think mathematics is witchcraft. You're lying in bed, feeling the new lumps growing under your skin like evil seeds planted in cursed soil, when a stranger arrives at your door. He's tall, dark-skinned, and dressed in robes that mark him as a foreign merchant. This is Hakim ibn Rashid, the trader who brought Agnes her exotic medicines. Hakim speaks Latin with an accent that makes every word sound like poetry, and his eyes hold the kind of deep knowledge that comes from studying in libraries, while Europe was still arguing about whether the earth was flat. He examines your lumps with gentle fingers and a concerned expression that's more reassuring than anything you've experienced from Christian healers. Your physicians think in humours and demons, he says quietly. My teachers in Baghdad understand that some illnesses are like seeds that grow in the wrong soil. Your body is not possessed. It is simply confused about which cells belong and which do not. It's the closest thing to actual medical understanding you've heard since this nightmare began. Hakim's explanation isn't scientifically accurate by the modern standards, but it's centuries ahead of medieval European medicine. He talks about the body as a complex system rather than a battleground between good and evil. Listen to the sound of coins clinking as Hakim counts out an astronomical sum for his most precious remedy. He produces a small glass vial containing liquid that looks like liquid gold and probably costs about the same. Inside floats what appears to be a perfectly preserved scorpion, its tail curved in an eternal strike. Scorpion essence, Hakim explains reverently. In the deserts of Arabia, scorpions eat poisonous plants and transform the poison into medicine. This essence will teach your body to transform its own poison into healing. The logic is still wrong by the modern standards, but it's elegant wrong, the kind of medical theory that makes sense within its own system of beliefs. You're supposed to drink 1 drop of the scorpion essence mixed with honey every day at sunrise while facing east toward the holy city of Mecca. The treatment costs 50 silver pieces, more than Master Guillaume wanted for surgery, more than your cottage is worth, more than you'll see in several lifetimes. But Hakim offers to accept payment in installments over the next 5 years, assuming you live that long to make them. You take the deal because what else are you going to do? The wolf is eating you alive, Christian medicine has failed, and this foreign healer with his exotic remedies represents the last thread of hope in a world that's rapidly running out of miracles. The scorpion essence tastes like concentrated lightning mixed with desert sand and ancient wisdom. Each drop burns your throat and fills your sinuses with the scent of distant lands where medicine is still half magic, but at least it's sophisticated magic. But as you lie in your cottage, feeling the exotic medicines racing through your bloodstream like liquid hope, you can't help but notice that the lumps continue growing. The wolf doesn't care whether its poison comes from European herbs or Arabian scorpions. It's an equal opportunity destroyer, and it's winning the war for your body one cell at a time. What happens next will test everything you believe about faith, medicine, and the simple human refusal to surrender. Word reaches you through the village gossip network that moves faster than plague and spreads wider than forest fires. There's a monastery 3 days' journey north where the monks have access to medical knowledge that makes everyone else look like children playing with wooden toys. Brother Augustine, the monastery's infirmarian, studied at the medical school in Salerno and has books written by Greek physicians whose names are whispered like prayers. You're now 4 months into your battle with the wolf and you look like a scarecrow that's lost a fight with winter. The exotic medicines have lightened your purse without shrinking your tumours, and new lumps appear weekly like unwelcome guests who bring their own luggage and plan to stay forever. The journey to the monastery nearly kills you before you arrive. Medieval roads are less roads and more suggestions for where you might want to walk if you don't mind mud, bandits and the occasional wolf. Every step sends pain shooting through your body, and you have to rest every mile like an old horse climbing a mountain. The monastery appears through the morning mist like a vision from heaven, or a mirage from hell, depending on your perspective. Stone walls rise from the landscape like prayers made manifest, and the bells calling monks to morning prayers sound like angels singing or souls screaming, depending on how much pain you're in. Brother Augustine is a small, neat man who looks like he's spent his entire life reading books by candlelight. His eyes are weak, but his hands are gentle, and when he examines your lumps, he does something revolutionary. He asks you questions about your symptoms, your pain, your daily life. No other healer has bothered to treat you like a person rather than a collection of interesting diseases. "Show me where it started," he says, and you point to the spot under your arm where the first lump appeared like an evil seed taking root. Brother Augustine nods and makes notes on a piece of parchment with handwriting so precise it looks like art. The monastery's infirmary is the cleanest place you've ever seen. The floors are swept, the walls are whitewashed, and everything smells like herbs and holiness instead of suffering and death. Brother Augustine leads you to a small chamber lined with shelves containing more books than you knew existed in the entire world. The Greek physicians understood that some diseases are like fires that spread through dry wood, Brother Augustine explains while consulting a massive tome written in Latin so dense it might as well be magical incantations. They called your condition karkinos, the crab, because it grips the flesh with claws and refuses to let go. Listen to the sound of pages turning as Brother Augustine searches through centuries of accumulated medical wisdom. These books contain the preserved knowledge of physicians who dissected human bodies, studied anatomy, and developed treatments based on observation rather than superstition. It's the closest thing to real medicine available in your medieval world. Brother Augustine shows you drawings of the human body that are more accurate than anything European physicians have produced. The illustrations show organs, blood vessels, and the lymphatic system where your cancer is spread like an army conquering territory. For the first time, someone is explaining your disease using actual anatomy rather than mythical beasts and angry demons. The Greeks developed a treatment they called burning out the crab, Brother Augustine continues, pointing to a passage written in Greek with Latin translations scribbled in the margins. They would cut away the diseased flesh and then apply caustic substances to prevent regrowth. It sounds remarkably similar to Master Guillaume's surgery, but with an important difference. The Greek physicians understood that cancer could spread through the body's natural channels. They developed techniques for removing not just the visible tumours, but also the pathways the disease might use to return. Brother Augustine produces a collection of surgical instruments that make Master Guillaume's tools look like kitchen knives. These are precision devices made from the finest steel, designed by physicians who understood that healing required more than sharp metal and strong wine. There are delicate forceps for grasping tiny vessels, curved needles for precise suturing, and cauterizing irons shaped to fit specific anatomical structures. But the monastery's most precious medical resource isn't tools or books, it's Brother Augustine's understanding of pain management. The Greeks developed techniques for reducing surgical pain that go far beyond getting patients drunk and giving them leather to bite. Brother Augustine shows you a collection of plants and preparations that can induce deep sleep or at least profound numbness. Mandragora root, opium poppy, hemp leaves, he explains while measuring precise amounts of each substance. Mixed in the correct proportions, these can make a person insensible to even the most invasive procedures. The mixture he prepares looks like muddy water, but smells like salvation. Brother Augustine explains that you'll drink this about an hour before surgery, and it will gradually drag your consciousness down into darkness where pain can't follow. It's not perfect anesthesia by modern standards, but it's centuries ahead of medieval wine and prayer methodology. The surgical procedure Brother Augustine proposes is more extensive than anything Master Guillaume attempted. Instead of simply cutting out visible tumours, he plans to trace the lymphatic pathways and remove all the channels through which cancer might spread. It's radical surgery that will leave you weak for months, but offers the best chance of actually defeating the wolf rather than just annoying it. I cannot promise success, Brother Augustine admits, with the honesty that comes from watching many patients die despite his best efforts. The crab is cunning and persistent. But if you're willing to risk everything on one final battle, this gives you the best chance any physician can offer. The cost isn't measured in silver pieces, but in time and service. If you survive the surgery, you'll work in the monastery's gardens for 2 years, helping to grow the medicinal plants that supply their pharmacy. If you die, well, at least you'll be buried in consecrated ground with prayers for your soul. It's the best deal anyone has offered you since this nightmare began. Sophisticated medical care in exchange for honest work rather than bankruptcy. Brother Augustine represents the pinnacle of medieval medical knowledge, and you're about to discover whether the pinnacle is high enough to save your life. But first, you need to survive surgery that's more extensive than anything performed in your medieval world using anesthesia that might kill you before the cancer gets the chance. What could possibly go wrong? You spend 3 days in the monastery's guest quarters, preparing your body and soul for what Brother Augustine cheerfully calls extensive surgical intervention, and what everyone else calls probably fatal mutilation. The monks feed you better food than you've eaten in years. Fresh bread, clean water, vegetables that don't taste like dirt, while gradually reducing your solid food intake to prepare your body for the trauma ahead. The night before surgery, Brother Augustine visits your cell for what medieval physicians call spiritual preparation, and modern doctors would recognize as informed consent mixed with last rites. He explained exactly what he's going to do to your body, using detailed anatomical drawings that make you wonder if agreeing to this was the stupidest decision in a life full of questionable choices. I'll make incisions here, here, and here, he says, pointing to marks on a diagram of a human torso. Then I'll trace the lymphatic vessels to remove not just the visible tumours, but also the pathways the disease uses to spread. Finally, I'll cauterize everything with a mixture of sulfur and quicklime to destroy any remaining diseased tissue. The procedure sounds like something designed by someone who confused surgery with excavation. Brother Augustine plans to essentially dig trenches through your body, following cancer's supply lines and destroying everything in his path. It's medieval medicine's version of scorched earth warfare, with your body as the battlefield. Listen to the sound of monks chanting evening prayers in the chapel below your window. Their voices rise and fall like waves of sound that wash over the monastery walls and spill into the countryside beyond. In a few hours, you'll either be joining their prayers or be on the need for earthly intercession. Brother Augustine shows you the surgical chamber where tomorrow's ordeal will unfold. It's a small stone room with a table positioned directly under a large window to maximize natural light. The walls are lined with surgical instruments that gleam like holy relics, and braziers stand ready to heat cauterizing irons until they glow like fallen stars. The Greeks understood that healing requires precision, Brother Augustine explains while checking his tools one final time. Every cut must serve a purpose, every cauterization must be exactly placed. Surgery is not butchery, it's sculpture, carving away disease to reveal the healthy body beneath. The anesthetic preparation begins at sunset with a cup of wine mixed with substances that smell like they were distilled from dreams and nightmares. The mandragora root makes your head feel heavy, the opium poppy wraps your thoughts in cotton, and the hemp leaves add a floating sensation that makes the stone walls seem to breathe. Sleep now, Brother Augustine instructs as the herbal mixture pulls your consciousness down into depths where pain becomes a distant rumour. When you wake, we'll know whether the crab has been defeated or whether it was stronger than our knowledge. You drift off to sleep in a monastery cell surrounded by the accumulated medical wisdom of centuries while cancer continues its patient work of destroying your body cell by cell. Tomorrow will determine whether medieval medicine's greatest knowledge is sufficient to defeat a disease that won't be truly understood for another 600 years. But right now, floating on a cloud of medieval anesthesia while monks chant prayers for your soul, you're suspended between life and death, hope and despair, the pinnacle of medieval medical care and the abyss of medieval ignorance. The last thing you remember before unconsciousness claims you is the sound of Brother Augustine sharpening his knives with the methodical precision of someone who takes pride in his craft. Each scrape of metal against stone sounds like a promise or a threat, depending on whether you believe in miracles or only in the mathematical certainty of medieval mortality rates. Tomorrow you'll discover whether knowledge, skill and prayer can defeat a wolf that's been feasting on your flesh for months, or whether some battles are simply too large for medieval warriors to win, no matter how sophisticated their weapons or how pure their intentions. You wake to the sound of bells calling monks to morning prayers, and the realization that today you're either going to be cured or killed by the most advanced medical procedure available in your medieval world. The mandragora root has left your head feeling stuffed with wool, but the lumps under your skin still throb with each heartbeat, reminding you why you're here. Brother Augustine arrives with 2 younger monks who will assist during the surgery. They're both pale and nervous, which doesn't inspire confidence in someone about to have his body excavated like an archaeological dig. Medieval surgery doesn't have the luxury of trained surgical teams. It's more like an artisan's workshop where the master craftsman hopes his apprentices won't faint at the sight of blood. Today we fight the crab, Brother Augustine announces with the cheerful determination of someone who's either completely confident or completely insane. Remember that pain is temporary, but defeating this disease will give you years of life. The surgical chamber has been prepared like an altar for some gruesome religious ceremony. Clean linen covers the table, surgical instruments are arranged in precise rows, and braziers glow with coals hot enough to turn iron red. The morning light streaming through the window illuminates everything with harsh clarity that makes you wish you were still unconscious. Brother Augustine begins by administering what he calls the Greek mixture, a combination of wine, opium, and mandragora root that's supposed to keep you from feeling the worst of what's about to happen. Medieval anesthesia is like trying to stop a forest fire with a squirt gun, but it's the best available technology for making surgery survivable. The first cut feels like lightning striking your chest. Even with the herbal anesthesia, the pain is so intense that your vision goes white around the edges, and you understand why medieval patients sometimes die from shock before the surgeon finishes. Brother Augustine works with steady, confident strokes, following anatomical knowledge that's centuries ahead of his time. "I can see the crab's main body," he murmurs, while probing with his fingers inside your open chest. "It's attached to the lymph vessels, just as the Greek texts described." "Clever beast at Doriasis. Oh, stop it. It's using your body's own channels to spread its poison." Listen to the sound of metal instruments clinking as Brother Augustine switches between different tools. Each instrument has a specific purpose based on Greek surgical knowledge. Forceps for grasping slippery tissues, curved needles for precise suturing, and cauterizing irons heated to specific temperatures for different types of tissue. The tumor removal process is like watching someone dismantle a complex piece of machinery while blindfolded. Brother Augustine cuts and probes, following the cancer's spread through your lymphatic system with the dedication of a scholar translating an ancient text. Every movement sends waves of pain through your body that make you understand why some patients beg to die during medieval surgery. Medieval surgical patients don't get the luxury of unconsciousness. They experience every cut, every probe, every moment of the procedure with full awareness. The herbal anesthetics dull the pain but don't eliminate it, leaving you suspended in a nightmare where you can feel everything but can't escape. "The crab has spread further than I hoped," Brother Augustine admits while removing what looks like a handful of diseased tissue. "But not as far as I feared. We're winning this battle, though the victory will be expensive." The expense he's referring to isn't measured in silver pieces, but in flesh and blood. Brother Augustine removes not just the visible tumours, but also large sections of surrounding tissue, lymph nodes and anything else that might harbour cancer cells. It's a radical surgery that leaves your body looking like a battlefield after a particularly brutal siege. But wait, there's more, much more. After removing the tumours comes the cauterization, pressing red-hot iron against your open wounds to seal blood vessels and purify the surgical site. The smell of burning flesh fills the chamber, and you realize with detached horror that it's your own body creating that nauseating odor. Brother Augustine works with the focused intensity of someone performing a religious ritual. Each application of hot iron is precisely placed according to Greek medical texts that describe exactly how much heat is needed to destroy diseased tissue without killing the patient. It's medieval medicine's version of radiation therapy, except instead of invisible rays, they're using actual fire. The cauterization process takes longer than the tumor removal because Brother Augustine treats every surface that might harbor cancer cells. Your chest looks like a patchwork of burned and sutured flesh by the time he finishes, and you've screamed yourself hoarse despite biting down on leather strips. Sleep now, Brother Augustine instructs as his assistants bandage your wounds with linen soaked in wine and honey. Your body needs all its strength to heal the battleground we've created. The next few days will determine whether we've defeated the crab or merely angered it. You drift into unconsciousness that's part medical necessity and part merciful escape from a body that feels like it's been struck by lightning, trampled by horses, and set on fire for good measure. Medieval surgery is an endurance test that makes surviving the disease look easy by comparison. But as you slip into drug-assisted sleep in a monastery infirmary that represents the pinnacle of medieval medical care, one thought follows you into darkness. You're still alive. And in your medieval world, still alive after surgery like this is the closest thing to a miracle that medicine can provide. You wake up 3 days later in what Brother Augustine cheerfully calls healing fever, and what feels like being slowly cooked from the inside out. Your body temperature has risen so high that the monastery's stone walls seem to shimmer like desert mirages, and every breath tastes like molten copper mixed with despair. Medieval medicine views fever as a positive sign, evidence that your body is fighting off the evil humours released during surgery. Modern medicine would recognise this as a massive infection brewing in wounds that were sealed with hot iron and bandaged with materials that haven't been properly sterilised. You're essentially fighting a war on two fronts, cancer and medieval surgical technique. Brother Augustine checks your wounds twice daily with the careful attention of someone reading Holy Scripture. These surgical sites are red, swollen, and weeping fluid, ranges from clear to yellow to colours that don't have names in any language. Each inspection involves unwrapping bandages that stick to your flesh like they've been glued on with pain. The body is purging the last traces of the crab's poison, Brother Augustine explains while examining tissue that looks like raw meat left in the sun too long. Fever burns away impurities just as fire purifies metals in the smith's forge. The fever brings dreams that feel more real than waking life. You see the wolf that's been eating you, except now it's wounded and angry, circling your bed like a predator deciding whether to retreat or make one final attack. Sometimes the wolf speaks with Master Guillaume's voice, sometimes with Agnes's, sometimes with your own voice, telling you that you should have died months ago instead of fighting the inevitable. Listen to the sound of monks chanting prayers for the sick during their evening offices. Their voices drift through your fever-hazed consciousness like lifelines thrown to a drowning man. Except you're not sure whether you want to be saved or allowed to slip beneath the waves of delirium that make everything soft and distant. The monastery's infirmary has other patients, monks who've injured themselves during manual labour, villagers who've travelled days for treatment, and other desperate souls fighting their own battles with medieval diseases. At night, when fever makes sleep impossible, you can hear them praying, crying, or simply breathing with the laboured rhythm of people whose bodies are betraying them. Brother Augustine brings you a steady stream of liquids designed to support the body's natural healing fire, while preventing you from burning up entirely. There's wine mixed with honey for strength, herbal teas that smell like gardens and taste like bitter earth, and broths made from ingredients that cost more than most people see in a year. The Greeks understood that healing requires balance, Brother Augustine explains while helping you sip a concoction that tastes like liquid sunshine mixed with ground-up hope. Too little heat and the disease returns. Too much heat and the patient dies. We're walking a path between two kinds of death. The fever reaches its peak on the 5th day after surgery, when your temperature climbs so high that you start hallucinating conversations with people who've been dead for years. Your wife sits beside your bed, looking exactly as she did on your wedding day, telling you that it's time to stop fighting and come home. Your parents offer advice about crops and weather, as if you're still a child learning to farm. But the hallucination that terrifies you most is Master Guillaume, standing at the foot of your bed with his surgical tools, shaking his head with professional disappointment. "I told you the wolf always returns," he says in the dream voice that sounds like rustling parchment. "Brother Augustine may have fancy books and Greek knowledge, but the crab doesn't care about ancient wisdom. It only cares about feeding." You wake from this fever dream to find Brother Augustine taking your pulse with fingers that feel cool as spring water against your burning skin. His face shows the kind of concern that medical professionals try to hide but can't completely suppress when their patients are sliding toward the edge of survivability. "The fever is breaking," he announces, and you're not sure whether that's good news or bad news in a medical system where fever is supposed to cure you. Your body has fought the healing fire to a draw. Now we'll see whether the crab survived the battle. The next few days pass in a haze of gradual cooling, like stepping from a furnace into merely warm air. Your wounds begin to show signs of actual healing rather than just angry inflammation, and the constant pain subsides to a level that's merely agonizing instead of completely unbearable. Brother Augustine examines the surgical sites with the satisfaction of someone whose theoretical knowledge has been validated by practical results. The incisions are closing properly, the cauterized areas are forming healthy scabs, and most importantly, there's no sign of the black corruption that indicates the crab's return. "You've survived the worst of it," Brother Augustine announces while rewrapping your wounds with fresh bandages that smell like herbs and optimism. The Greek physicians were right. Aggressive removal combined with thorough cauterization can defeat the crab if the patient is strong enough to survive the cure. But as you lie in your monastery bed, feeling strength slowly return to a body that's been through medieval medicine's equivalent of a nuclear assault, you can't shake the fear that the wolf is simply hiding, waiting for you to recover enough strength to make feeding on you interesting again. Still, for the first time in months, the lumps aren't growing, and in your medieval world, not getting worse is sometimes the closest thing to a cure that medicine can provide. 6 weeks after Brother Augustine performed surgery that would make modern physicians weep with horror and admiration in equal measure, you're sitting up in bed eating solid food without immediately vomiting it back up. This represents such remarkable progress that the other monks have started referring to your recovery as evidence of divine intervention rather than medical skill. The surgical scars have healed into raised lines of scar tissue that look like someone drew a map of medieval road systems across your chest and arms. Brother Augustine examines them daily with the pride of an artist admiring his masterpiece, pointing out how cleanly the incisions closed and how thoroughly the cauterization prevented infection. "The Greeks would be impressed," he says while tracing the scars with gentle fingers. "Perfect healing, no corruption, and most importantly, no sign that the crab survived our assault. You're living proof that ancient wisdom combined with modern technique can defeat even the most persistent diseases." The word modern in Brother Augustine's vocabulary refers to surgical innovations that are maybe 50 years old rather than techniques dating back to classical antiquity. In your medieval world, cutting-edge medicine is literally about having sharper cutting edges and better knowledge of where to use them. You can feel strength returning to your body like water, slowly filling a dry well. Tasks that were impossible a month ago, sitting up without help, walking to the privy, eating without assistance, now seem merely difficult rather than completely beyond your capabilities. Your body is remembering how to function as something other than a host for malignant growths. But listen carefully to the sound of your own heartbeat. There's something different about it now, something that makes you pause and count the rhythm. Is it beating irregularly, or are you just hyper-aware of every bodily function after months of waiting for your body to betray you? Brother Augustine teaches you exercises designed to rebuild strength lost during your illness and recovery. These involve lifting small weights, walking prescribed distances, and performing breathing techniques that the Greeks supposedly used to restore balance to patients recovering from major surgery. It's medieval physical therapy based on humoral theory and wishful thinking. The body must remember its proper functions, Brother Augustine explains, while supervising your attempt to lift a bag of grain that would have been effortless before your illness. Disease teaches the flesh bad habits. Recovery requires retraining every muscle, every organ, every system to work in harmony again. The other patients in the monastery infirmary watch your progress with the mixed emotions of people who are drowning while someone else learns to swim. Some are genuinely happy for your recovery. Others show the bitter resentment that comes from watching someone else receive the miracle they've been praying for. There's a monk named Brother Francis who's dying slowly from what sounds like lung cancer, coughing up blood and growing thinner despite the monastery's excellent food. He watches your recovery exercises with eyes that hold too much knowledge and not enough hope. The crab chooses its victims carefully, Brother Francis whispers, during one of your conversations. Those it releases, it marks for return. You think you've won, but you've only earned a temporary reprieve. His words plant seeds of doubt that grow faster than weeds in fertile soil. Every minor ache, every moment of fatigue, every irregular heartbeat makes you wonder whether Brother Francis is right. Maybe your recovery is just intermission in a play that ends with your death regardless of medical intervention. Brother Augustine begins discussing your discharge from the monastery with the business-like efficiency of someone who needs the bed for other desperate patients. You've survived surgery, recovered from infection, and regained enough strength to work in the monastery gardens as payment for your treatment. In medieval medicine, being well enough to perform manual labour is the definition of cured. You'll stay through winter helping with our medicinal plants, Brother Augustine explains while reviewing the work schedule. Spring planting, summer cultivation, autumn harvest, 2 years of honest work in exchange for the most advanced medical treatment available in Christendom. It's a fair deal, better than fair considering that you were essentially dead 6 months ago and are now negotiating employment terms. The monastery's gardens produce the herbs that supply their medical practice, making you part of a system that helps heal other desperate patients like yourself. But as you walk through the monastery grounds, feeling autumn wind bite at your healing scars, you can't shake the feeling that something is watching you from the shadows. Not the wolf, that beast is gone, carved away by Brother Augustine's skill and burned out by Greek fire. This is something else, something patient and calculating that knows you're marked now, changed by your battle with cancer in ways that go deeper than surgical scars. The lumps are gone, the fever is broken, and your strength is returning. By every measure available to medieval medicine, you're cured. But cure and healed aren't the same thing, and you're beginning to understand that some battles leave scars that never fully fade. Still, you're alive. You're walking, working, eating, and planning for a future that extends beyond next week. In your medieval world, that's not just recovery, it's resurrection from a death that seemed inevitable just months ago. The question now is whether this resurrection will last, or whether Brother Francis was right about the crab marking its victims for eventual return. But that's a worry for tomorrow. Tonight, you're alive, and in medieval times, being alive at the end of any day is its own small victory. Spring arrives at the monastery like a cautious promise, bringing with it your first full season as someone who survived medieval cancer treatment. You wake before dawn to ring the bell for morning prayers, your scarred chest aching in the cold air but your lungs filling completely for the first time in over a year. The simple act of breathing without pain feels like a daily miracle. Brother Augustine has assigned you to work in the medicinal gardens, which means you're literally growing the herbs that might save the next desperate soul who arrives seeking treatment for the gnawing wolf. There's something both humbling and hopeful about planting seeds that might cure diseases you can't even pronounce. The monastery's gardens are laid out with the geometric precision that medieval minds bring to everything they consider holy. Neat rows of lavender, rosemary and sage create patterns that look like prayers written in living green. Each plant has its purpose: feverfew for headaches, comfrey for broken bones, and mandrake for the kind of surgery that you survived against odds that would make a gambler weep. Listen to the sound of your hoe breaking earth that's been cultivated by the monks for 3 centuries. Each strike releases the smell of rich soil, mixed with the lingering essence of last year's herb harvest. Your scarred hands have grown strong again, calloused from honest work instead of weakened by disease, and there's satisfaction in labour that produces healing rather than just survival. Working alongside you is Brother Thomas, a young monk who joined the monastery after losing his entire family to plague. He tends the more dangerous plants, the ones used for surgery and serious illness, with the careful attention of someone who understands that the difference between medicine and poison is often just a matter of dosage. Every plant in this garden has saved someone's life, Brother Thomas explains, while harvesting opium poppies with movements so precise they look choreographed. but everyone could kill just as easily. Growing medicine is like forging swords. The same skill that creates weapons can create tools for protection. You're learning to identify medicinal plants by sight, smell, and even taste when necessary. Medieval herbalism requires senses that modern people have forgotten how to use. You can tell when rosemary is ready for harvest by the way morning dew beads on its leaves, when lavender has reached peak potency by the depth of its colour, when mandrake root is mature enough for surgical use by the particular scream it makes when pulled from the earth. The monastery's patients often visit the gardens during their recovery, walking slowly between the rows while their bodies remember how to function without pain. You recognise the careful way they move, the protective posture that guards against sudden movements, the look in their eyes that says they're still not entirely convinced they deserve to be alive. A woman named Margaret arrives in late spring with lumps in her neck that make your own scars ache in sympathy. She's maybe 30 years old, but moves like someone twice that age, bent over with pain and the weight of knowing what's growing inside her. Brother Augustine examines her with the same gentle thoroughness he showed you, and you know she's facing the same impossible choices you confronted. Margaret can't afford surgery any more than you could, but she has something you didn't, skills that the monastery needs. She's a skilled weaver who can create the fine linen used for surgical bandages and the precise nets needed to strain medicinal tinctures. Brother Augustine accepts her offer to work for treatment, and suddenly you have company in the gardens. Does it ever stop hurting? Margaret asks, while you teach her to identify the plants used in surgical anesthesia. She's looking at your scars with the focused attention of someone studying a map of territory she might have to cross. The scars hurt when it rains, you admit, but it's clean pain, honest pain. Not like the gnawing that never stops. You learn to tell the difference between pain that means something's wrong and pain that just means you're alive. Working in the monastery gardens teaches you things about healing that no physician's examination could reveal. You learn that recovery isn't a destination but a daily choice, that strength returns gradually like sunrise rather than suddenly like lightning, and that surviving cancer changes how you see everything from the colour of morning sky to the taste of simple bread. But you also learn that survival brings its own burdens. Every new patient reminds you how close you came to death. Every funeral in the village makes you wonder why you were spared when others weren't, and every small ache makes you check for lumps that might signal the wolf's return. The monastery's library becomes your refuge during long summer evenings when work in the gardens is finished. Brother Augustine allows you access to medical texts that most laypeople never see, and you spend hours studying illustrations of human anatomy and reading treatments for diseases you hope never to encounter. Knowledge is the best protection against fear, Brother Augustine explains while showing you a Greek text that describes cancer in terms so accurate they could have been written yesterday instead of 1,000 years ago. Understanding how disease works makes it less frightening even when you can't cure it. But as autumn approaches and you complete your first full year as a cancer survivor in medieval times, you're beginning to understand that knowledge brings its own terrors. The more you learn about cancer, the more you realise how little medieval medicine actually understands about it, and how much your survival depended on luck rather than skill. Still, you're alive, working, and contributing to healing rather than just consuming it. In your medieval world, that transformation from patient to healer represents a kind of spiritual resurrection that goes beyond mere physical recovery. The question is whether this new life you've built will be enough when the wolf decides to return. 2 years after Brother Augustine carved the cancer from your body with Greek precision and medieval determination, you're stronger than you've been since childhood. The monastery gardens have built muscle on your frame, while the regular meals have put healthy flesh over bones that once showed through skin like fence posts. You look like someone who wrestled with death and won, which is exactly what happened. But on a cold October morning, while harvesting the last of the season's medicinal herbs, you feel it. A small hard lump under your left arm, exactly where the first one appeared 3 years ago. Your blood turns to ice water, and the bundle of dried sage you're carrying falls from suddenly nerveless fingers. The lump is tiny, maybe the size of a pea, but it feels enormous under your probing fingers. It's firm, immovable, and carries with it the weight of every nightmare you've had about the wolf's return. Brother Francis's words echo in your memory like a funeral bell. The crab chooses its victims carefully. Those it releases, it marks for return. You spend the rest of the day trying to convince yourself that it's just a swollen gland. Maybe a reaction to the changing weather or the dust from threshing grain. Medieval bodies develop lumps and bumps all the time from injury, infection, or simple bad luck. Not every lump is the wolf coming home to finish what it started, but you know better. This lump has the same feel, the same ominous presence as the original tumour that nearly killed you. The cancer that Brother Augustine carved away with such skill and confidence has found a way to return, like smoke seeping back through cracks in a wall you thought was sealed. Listen to the sound of your own heartbeat, suddenly loud in your ears as fear floods your system with the kind of adrenaline that makes medieval peasants lift fallen trees or fight off wolves with their bare hands. Every pulse sends blood past the new tumour, potentially feeding it, helping it grow, carrying cancer cells to new locations throughout your body. Brother Augustine examines the lump with fingers that have grown more gentle with age, but no less skilled at detecting disease. His face shows the kind of professional disappointment that comes from watching too many patients lose battles they thought they'd won. The crab has returned, he confirms with the straightforward honesty that medieval medicine brings to hopeless situations. Smaller than before, but unmistakably the same disease. It seems your body learned to grow this particular kind of evil. The diagnosis hits you like a physical blow, even though you knew it was coming from the moment you felt that familiar hardness under your skin. You've spent 2 years believing you'd beaten cancer with medieval medicine's best efforts, only to discover that victory was temporary and the war is starting over. Medieval medicine has no concept of metastasis, remission, or recurrence rates. To Brother Augustine, your cancer's return means either his surgery wasn't thorough enough, or your body has some fundamental flaw that creates malignant growth. Both explanations lead to the same conclusion. The treatments that saved you once are unlikely to work again. Surgery would be more extensive this time, Brother Augustine explains while reviewing his notes from your previous operation. The crab has learned to hide better, to spread through pathways we didn't know existed. I would need to remove not just the tumour but large sections of surrounding tissue, possibly including parts of your chest wall. The surgery he's describing sounds less like medical treatment and more like controlled dismantlement of your body. Medieval medicine's approach to recurrent cancer is essentially cut until you find clean tissue, which often means cutting until there's no patient left to save. The cost wouldn't be measured in silver pieces this time. You've already earned your treatment through 2 years of garden work. But the price in flesh and blood would be higher than before, and the chances of survival lower. Second surgeries in medieval times are usually desperation moves that kill more patients than they cure. You walk through the monastery gardens that evening, surrounded by plants you've grown and harvested for healing other people's diseases. The irony isn't lost on you that you're probably going to die surrounded by medicine that can't save you, like a blacksmith who forges swords but can't defend himself in battle. Margaret finds you there as darkness falls, sitting between the rows of lavender that will be harvested for next year's surgical preparations. Her own treatment was successful. Brother Augustine removed her tumours 6 months ago, and she's been cancer-free since then. But now she looks at you with the understanding that comes from shared experience of facing death. "It's back?" she asks, though your face has already given her the answer. Medieval people learned to read the signs of returning illness in each other's expressions, the way sailors learn to read storm clouds. Smaller than before, but unmistakable, you confirm while unconsciously touching the spot where the new lump sits like a ticking time bomb under your skin. Brother Augustine says surgery is possible, but second battles are harder to win, Margaret finishes. She's been in the monastery long enough to watch other patients face recurring disease, and she knows the statistics even if medieval medicine doesn't keep formal records. You spend the night staring at the ceiling of your monk's cell, feeling the lump throb with each heartbeat while your mind races through impossible calculations. Surgery might save you, but will probably kill you. Refusing surgery will definitely kill you, but more slowly. Choosing between different kinds of death isn't really choosing at all. But as dawn light creeps through your window and bells call the community to morning prayers, you realise something has changed since your first battle with cancer. You're no longer the desperate peasant who would try anything to survive. You're someone who's lived with the knowledge of mortality, who's made peace with the idea that life is temporary and death is certain. The question now isn't whether you can beat cancer again, it's whether the battle is worth fighting when victory might be worse than surrender. 3 weeks after discovering the new lump, you've made a decision that shocks everyone who knows your story. You're refusing Brother Augustine's offer of surgery. Instead, You're choosing to live with cancer until it kills you, treating symptoms but not fighting the disease itself. In medieval terms, you're choosing to die well rather than risk dying badly. Brother Augustine receives your decision with the kind of professional acceptance that comes from watching many patients choose death over treatment. Medieval medicine offers cures that are often worse than diseases, and experienced physicians understand why someone might prefer a predictable death to an uncertain rescue. I cannot say you're wrong, Brother Augustine admits, while examining the lump that's grown noticeably in just 3 weeks. Second surgeries rarely succeed, and the suffering required, perhaps there's wisdom in accepting what cannot be changed. His honesty is both brutal and comforting. Modern medicine would pressure you to try every possible treatment, to fight until the last breath, to never give up hope even when hope becomes indistinguishable from torture. Medieval medicine, for all its ignorance about disease mechanisms, understands something important about the difference between healing and prolonging suffering. You continue working in the monastery gardens, but now your labour has a different quality. Instead of building toward a future you expect to see, you're creating something that will continue after you're gone. Every plant you tend, every seed you sow, every herb you harvest might help heal someone else after your own healing days are over. The other monks treat you with a mixture of respect and caution that medieval people reserve for the dying. You've become a kind to me, of living saint, someone who's faced death twice and chosen dignity over desperate struggle. They ask for your prayers, seek your advice, and speak to you with the reverence usually reserved for holy relics. But the hardest part isn't the physical symptoms of advancing cancer, though those are becoming impossible to ignore. The hardest part is watching other patients arrive seeking the same miracle you received, knowing that you're proof miracles don't always last. Your presence in the monastery is both inspiration and warning. Even the best medieval medicine can offer is temporary. Margaret struggles with your decision more than anyone else. She's the person most like you, the one who understands both the terror of cancer and the relief of successful treatment. Your refusal to fight represents the possibility that her own cure might be temporary, that the wolf might return for her as well. How can you just give up, she asks, while you teach her the finer points of harvesting mandrake root for surgical anesthesia. You survived once. You could survive again. I survived once because I was desperate enough to risk everything, you reply, while carefully digging around the valuable root. Now I'm experienced enough to know that some risks aren't worth taking. There's a difference between courage and stupidity, and I've learned to tell them apart. Listen to the sound of one through the herb gardens, carrying the scents of plants that heal, and plants that harm with equal efficiency. Medieval medicine walks a narrow line between cure and poison, just as life walks a narrow line between meaning and meaninglessness. Your decision to stop fighting isn't surrender. It's recognition that some battles cost more than victory is worth. The cancer progresses with medieval efficiency, spreading through lymph nodes and organs with the patient persistence that makes it such an effective killer. New lumps appear regularly, your appetite fades, and pain becomes a constant companion rather than an occasional visitor. But you face these changes with something that medieval people would recognize as grace, the ability to suffer without losing dignity. Brother Augustine provides pain management that's sophisticated by medieval standards, carefully measured doses of opium, wine infused with willow bark, and herbal preparations that dull suffering without completely eliminating consciousness. Medieval palliative care isn't about curing disease, but about helping people die as comfortably as possible within the constraints of available knowledge. The Greeks understood that knowing when to stop fighting is as important as knowing when to start, Brother Augustine explains, while adjusting your pain medication. A physician's job isn't to prevent death, but to help patients live well with whatever time they have. As winter approaches and your strength continues to fade, you spend more time in the monastery's library, reading medical texts that describe cancer, in terms you now understand from bitter personal experience. The Greek physicians wrote about patients who chose death over treatment, who decided that quality of life mattered more than quantity, who found peace in acceptance rather than desperation in continued struggle. Your decision to die with dignity rather than fight uselessly becomes a teaching tool for the other monks and patients. Medieval medicine learns as much from observing peaceful deaths as from witnessing dramatic cures, and your choice to face cancer without panic provides lessons that will help future patients make their own impossible decisions. But as you lie in your monastery bed on increasingly cold nights, listening to wind rattle the shutters while cancer slowly claims territory throughout your body. You would discover something unexpected. Choosing how to die gives you a different kind of control over life than choosing how to fight for it. You're dying, yes, but you're dying as yourself, rather than as a desperate victim of medieval medicine's limitations. And in your medieval world, maintaining dignity in the face of inevitable death is its own form of victory, perhaps the only victory that really matters when all other battles have been lost. Winter settles over the monastery like a grey blanket, and you settle into the rhythm of dying with medieval precision. The cancer has spread throughout your body with the systematic thoroughness of an army occupying territory, establishing outposts in your liver, lungs, and bones with military efficiency. Pain is now your constant companion, as faithful and unwelcome as a dog that follows you everywhere. Brother Augustine has moved you to a private cell near the infirmary, where the sounds of other patients won't disturb your rest and your increasing need for pain medication won't disturb theirs. Medieval dying is a communal process in theory, but often a solitary reality, especially when the dying takes months rather than days. The cell is small but comfortable by medieval standards, a narrow bed with clean straw mattress, a wooden cross on the wall, and a window that looks out on the herb gardens you'll never harvest again. Brother Augustine visits twice daily to check your condition and adjust your medications, treating your dying with the same careful attention he gave to your healing. The body is teaching us about surrender, Brother Augustine observes, while examining lumps that now cover your torso like a map of conquered territories. Each tumour represents a battle your flesh has chosen to stop fighting. There's wisdom in knowing when resistance becomes pointless suffering. Medieval medicine views death as a natural process that can be managed but not prevented, like childbirth or seasonal weather. The goal isn't to cure your cancer, that's clearly impossible now, but to help you die as comfortably and spiritually prepared as available knowledge allows. Pain management in medieval times requires constant adjustment between relief and awareness. Too little medication leaves you writhing in agony. Too much leaves you unconscious and unable to prepare your soul for judgment. Brother Augustine walks this line with the skill of someone who's helped many people navigate the territory between living and dying. Listen to the sound of monks chanting evening prayers in the chapel below your window. Their voices rise and fall in Latin phrases that speak of eternal rest and divine mercy, concepts that sound more appealing with each passing day. Medieval Christianity offers detailed instructions for dying well, and you're receiving the full curriculum. Father Benedict, the monastery's confessor, visits regularly to help you examine your conscience and prepare for whatever judgment awaits after death. Medieval dying involves extensive spiritual housekeeping, confessing sins, seeking forgiveness, making peace with enemies, and distributing whatever worldly goods you possess. Tell me about your anger, Father Benedict suggests during one of these sessions. Medieval confession goes deeper than simple sin catalogue. It's spiritual archaeology, digging through layers of resentment, fear, and unfinished emotional business to reach something resembling peace. You find yourself confessing things you didn't know bothered you. Resentment toward healthy people who complain about minor ailments, anger at God for letting cancer return after you'd survived it once, fear that your suffering serves no purpose beyond entertainment for cosmic forces that view human pain as amusing. Anger at injustice is natural, Father Benedict assures you. Even Christ felt forsaken on the cross. The goal isn't to eliminate difficult emotions, but to avoid letting them poison what time remains. Medieval Christianity has elaborate theories about suffering that range from punishment for sin, say, to testing of faith, to mysterious participation in divine plans beyond human understanding. None of these explanations make cancer hurt less, but they provide frameworks for making sense of senseless pain. Margaret visits daily, bringing news from the gardens and updates on other patients whose conditions you understand better than anyone else in the monastery. She's become the unofficial liaison between the dying and the living, translating medical realities for family members who don't understand how someone can be getting better care than ever before while simultaneously getting worse. The woman with the growths in her stomach wants to know if surgery helped your pain, Margaret reports, while adjusting your blankets against the winter cold that seems to seep through stone walls like medieval central heating in reverse. Her family thinks she should try anything available. Tell her that surgery stopped the pain for 2 years, you reply, after considering how to frame your experience. Whether 2 years of health is worth the suffering depends on what she values more, time or comfort. Both choices are reasonable, neither is wrong. Medieval medicine forces patients to make impossible decisions based on incomplete information, but it also provides something modern medicine often lacks: honest acknowledgement that some situations have no good solutions, only different kinds of loss. Your appetite has disappeared almost entirely, and eating becomes a chore performed to maintain politeness rather than sustain life. Food tastes like ash, and swallowing requires conscious effort that seems increasingly pointless. Brother Augustine doesn't pressure you to eat, but ensures that what little you consume is as nutritious and palatable as medieval cooking can make it. The monastery's cook, Brother Marcus, prepares special broths designed for the dying, thin soups infused with pain-relieving herbs, honey mixed with wine to provide energy without requiring digestion, and herbal teas that smell better than they taste but offer comfort in the ritual of sipping warm liquid. But the strangest part of medieval dying is how it changes your relationship with time. Days no longer have the urgent quality of healthy life but stretch like honey in winter, each hour containing enough experience for what used to feel like entire days. Pain makes minutes feel eternal, while approaching death makes weeks feel instant. You spend increasing time in a twilight state between sleeping and waking, consciousness floating between present reality and memories that feel more vivid. Current experience. Medieval pain medication doesn't eliminate awareness so much as make it flexible, allowing you to drift between different levels of attention to physical suffering. As winter deepens and your condition deteriorates with the seasonal reliability of harvest cycles, you begin to understand something about medieval dying that modern medicine often misses. Death isn't failure, but completion. Not defeat, but graduation to whatever comes next. The question isn't whether you'll die. That's been settled since the cancer returned. The question is whether you'll die well, with dignity intact and spiritual accounts balanced, having used your dying time to teach others something valuable about facing the inevitable with grace. Spring arrives without you noticing, which tells you everything you need to know about how far your journey toward death has progressed. The monastery gardens are beginning their annual resurrection outside your window, but your own season is moving in the opposite direction, toward the kind of winter that doesn't end with returning warmth. Brother Augustine's examinations have become formalities rather than medical assessments. The cancer has claimed so much territory in your body that treating individual symptoms is like trying to bail out a sinking ship with a teacup. His focus now is entirely on comfort, adjusting pain medications, preventing bed sores, and ensuring that your dying doesn't become unnecessarily difficult. Your body is preparing for departure. Brother Augustine explains while checking your pulse, which has become irregular and weak like the heartbeat of an exhausted runner. The cancer isn't fighting your system anymore, it's replacing it. Soon there won't be enough healthy tissue left to sustain life. Medieval medicine talks about death with the straightforward honesty that comes from watching it regularly, without having treatments that can postpone it indefinitely. There's something both terrifying and comforting about physicians who acknowledge that their job includes helping people die well when healing becomes impossible. Father Benedict arrives with the holy oils and ceremonial preparations for extreme unction, the medieval sacrament designed to prepare souls for judgment and bodies for burial. The ritual involves anointing your forehead, hands and feet with blessed oil, while reciting prayers that speak of mercy, forgiveness and safe passage to whatever waits beyond mortal existence. Through this holy unction and his own most tender mercy, Father Benedict intones while making the sign of the cross on your fevered forehead, "May the Lord pardon thee whatever sins thou hast committed by sight, by hearing, by smell, by taste, by touch, by walking, by carnal delectation." The ceremony addresses every way a medieval person might have sinned, acknowledging that human bodies are essentially sin-generating machines that require thorough spiritual cleansing before facing divine judgment. It's comprehensive spiritual maintenance designed to address any possible source of divine displeasure. Listen to the sound of your own breathing, which has become laboured and irregular, as your lungs struggle with tumours that make each breath an effort rather than an automatic function. Medieval people pay attention to breathing patterns as signs of approaching death, and yours clearly indicate that the final phase of dying has begun. Margaret sits beside your bed during the long afternoon hours, sometimes talking, sometimes reading from medical texts that describe treatments you'll never need again. Her presence provides comfort that goes beyond conversation. Simply having someone witness your dying helps prevent it from feeling like disappearance into nothing. The new patient with lumps in her neck asked if you have any advice, Margaret reports while helping you sip water that tastes like liquid metal. She's scheduled for surgery next week and wanted to know what someone who's been through this would tell her. You consider the question while gathering strength for what might be your last piece of meaningful communication. What wisdom does someone dying of medieval cancer have to offer someone about to risk medieval surgery? The answer comes slowly but clearly. Tell her that surviving surgery doesn't mean defeating cancer, and dying of cancer doesn't mean the treatment failed. Both outcomes are part of the same process, fighting disease with whatever tools are available. The goal isn't to live forever, but to use whatever time you have as well as possible. It's the kind of advice that only makes sense when viewed from the perspective of approaching death, when the desperate urgency of staying alive gives way to the calmer concern with dying meaningfully. Medieval wisdom often comes from people who've run out of alternatives to being wise. The monasteries other patients visit when their own conditions allow, creating an informal community of the sick that provides mutual support impossible to find among the healthy. They understand things about illness and mortality that, well, people can't grasp. How pain changes time, how proximity to death clarifies priorities, how suffering can become either meaningful or meaningless depending on the framework you use to interpret it. Brother Thomas, who tends the more dangerous medicinal plants, brings you samples from the garden you helped establish. The opium poppies are blooming magnificently, their petals like drops of blood against green leaves. The mandrake plants are mature enough for surgical harvest. The willow trees are producing bark that will ease other patients' pain. Your work continues even after you can't work, Brother Thomas observes while showing you seeds saved from plants you cultivated. These medicines will help the people you'll never meet, fighting diseases you'll never see. There's a kind of immortality in healing, even when healers themselves can't be healed. Medieval monasteries understand something about legacy that modern institutions often miss. Individual lives gain meaning through contributing to projects larger than personal survival. Your dying isn't failure for you, but completion of a cycle that includes both growth and decay, healing and sickness. Knowledge gained and knowledge passed forward. As evening falls and bells call the community to compline prayers, you find yourself drifting between consciousness and something deeper, more restful than sleep but not yet as final as death. Medieval dying involves gradual disengagement from physical existence rather than sudden cessation, like a ship slowly disappearing beyond the horizon rather than sinking abruptly. The pain medications create a buffer between your awareness and your body's distress, allowing you to observe your own dying with something approaching objective curiosity. You're experiencing what medieval mystics called the art of dying well, maintaining spiritual composure while physical systems shut down according to their own biological logic. But the most surprising discovery about medieval dying is how much it resembles medieval living. Both require patience, acceptance of circumstances beyond your control, faith in purposes larger than immediate comfort, and the ability to find meaning in situations that seem designed to destroy meaning. Tomorrow, or perhaps tonight, your particular experiment in medieval cancer survival will reach its conclusion, but the knowledge you've gained about facing impossible diseases with inadequate medicine will continue in the monastery's traditions, in the gardens you helped establish, and in the example you've provided of how to die with dignity when dying becomes inevitable. You wake on what will be your last morning to the sound of bells calling monks to Lord's prayers, though the distinction between waking and sleeping has become increasingly meaningless. Your consciousness floats in a twilight space between worlds, anchored to your dying body by the threads that grow thinner with each laboured breath. Brother Augustine performs his final examination with gentle hands that confirm what you both already know. Your body has reached the point where continuing to live requires more effort than it can sustain. The cancer has claimed your liver, lungs, and enough other vital organs that death isn't approaching anymore. It's arrived and is simply waiting for the last formalities to conclude. Your battle is ending, Brother Augustine says softly while checking your pulse one last time. You've fought longer and more courageously than most patients manage. Now it's time to let go of fighting and concentrate on departing peacefully. Medieval medicine views death as a skill that can be performed well or poorly like any other human activity. The goal isn't to prevent dying, but to help patients die with dignity, spiritual preparation, and as little suffering as possible given the limitations of available knowledge and technology. Father Benedict returns for final confession and communion, offering you the last rites that medieval Christianity provides for souls preparing to face divine judgment. The ritual involves confession of any remaining sins, reception of the Eucharist, and prayers for peaceful passage to whatever existence awaits beyond mortal life. Do you forgive all those who have wronged you? Father Benedict asks as part of the formal preparation for death. Do you ask forgiveness from all those you have wronged? Are you prepared to surrender your soul to divine mercy? The questions address medieval Christianity's understanding that dying well requires resolving earthly conflicts and surrendering control to higher powers. You've spent months preparing for these final moments, examining your conscience and making peace with both your own limitations and the cosmic injustices that include cancer, medieval medicine, and the general unfairness of human existence. Margaret sits beside your bed holding your hand, which has become thin and cold as circulation fails throughout your body. Her presence provides anchor points for consciousness that keeps drifting away from physical awareness like smoke dispersing in still air. Tell me about the gardens, you whisper, wanting to hear about life continuing beyond your own participation in it. Margaret describes spring planting, new patients learning to cultivate medicinal herbs, and the eternal cycle of growth and harvest that will continue long after your particular contribution ends. Listen to the sound of your own breathing, which has become shallow and irregular as your lungs struggle with fluid accumulation and tumour pressure. Medieval people understand that breathing patterns indicate how close death actually is, and yours clearly show that the final transition has begun. The monastery's community gathers for what medieval tradition calls keeping watch with the dying, a practice that ensures no one dies alone and unwitnessed. Monks take turns praying, reading scripture, and simply maintaining presence while you navigate the transition from living person to peaceful memory. Brother Augustine adjusts your pain medication one final time, providing enough relief to keep suffering manageable without hastening death artificially. Medieval medicine walks a careful line between allowing natural dying and actively causing it, treating death as a process that can be supported but shouldn't be forced. The Greeks wrote about death as returning to the elements from which life emerges, Brother Augustine explains, while making you as comfortable as possible. Your body returns to earth, but your contributions to healing continue in the knowledge you've helped preserve and the plants you've helped grow. As afternoon light fades through your window and evening approaches, you find your awareness becoming increasingly detached from physical sensations. Pain recedes not because the cancer is improving, but because your nervous system is gradually shutting down according to its own biological programming. The monastery bells ring for Vespers prayers, and the sound seems to come from very far away, even though the chapel is directly below your window. Medieval dying involves progressive disconnection from earthly concerns as consciousness prepares for whatever transition awaits beyond physical existence. Your last coherent thought is gratitude, not for surviving cancer, because you didn't, but for the unexpected gift of dying surrounded by people who understand that death is natural completion rather than medical failure. Medieval medicine couldn't cure your cancer, but it provided something perhaps more valuable, a framework for dying meaningfully within a community that honours both suffering and acceptance. Margaret continues holding your hand as your breathing becomes slower and more irregular, then gradually stops altogether as your body completes its transition from living organism to peaceful remains. Medieval death typically comes quietly rather than dramatically, like a candle flame that simply goes out when the wax is consumed. The monastery bells ring again, this time announcing that another soul has completed its earthly journey and begun whatever comes next. Your particular experiment in surviving medieval cancer has ended, but the knowledge you helped preserve and the example you provided will continue helping future patients face their own impossible battles with courage, dignity, and realistic hope. In your medieval world, that continuation is the closest thing to immortality that medicine can provide, not preventing death, but ensuring that each death contributes something meaningful to the ongoing human struggle against disease, ignorance, and despair. Your story ends here, but the monastery gardens will bloom again next spring, growing medicines that might help the next desperate soul who arrives at seeking treatment for the gnawing wolf, and that's exactly how you would have wanted it to end. Your story ends in a monastery garden, where herbs grow from soil enriched by centuries of hope, desperation, and the accumulated wisdom that comes from watching people die as well as they can manage. But the lessons from your medieval cancer journey extend far beyond the monastery walls, offering insights that echo across 7 centuries to reach our modern world. Medieval cancer survival teaches us something profound about the difference between curing disease and healing people. Brother Augustine couldn't cure your cancer. Medieval medicine lacked the knowledge, tools and techniques necessary to eliminate malignant cells from your body permanently. But he could and did provide healing in the broader sense, relief from suffering, dignity in dying, meaning in the face of meaninglessness, and community during the most isolating experience human beings can face. Modern medicine, with its sophisticated understanding of cancer biology and arsenal of treatments that medieval physicians couldn't imagine, sometimes loses sight of this distinction. We can cure many cancers that would have been automatic death sentences in your medieval world, but we don't always heal the whole person experiencing the disease. Your story reminds us that healing involves more than eliminating abnormal cells. It requires addressing fear, isolation, despair, and the fundamental human need for meaning and suffering. The medieval approach to cancer treatment was simultaneously primitive and surprisingly sophisticated. Primitive in its understanding of disease mechanisms, the humoral theory, demonic possession, and astrological influences bear no resemblance to actual cancer biology, but sophisticated in its recognition that treating disease requires treating the entire person within their social, spiritual, and economic context. Listen to the echoes of medieval wisdom in modern discussions about patient-centered care, holistic medicine, and the importance of addressing psychological and spiritual needs alongside physical symptoms. Your medieval healers understood intuitively what modern medicine is slowly rediscovering, that disease affects whole persons, not just organ systems, and effective treatment must address human beings in their full complexity. Medieval medicine's greatest limitation was also its greatest strength, honesty about uncertainty and limitations. Agnes the wise woman, Master Guillaume the surgeon and brother, and Augustine the monastery physician all acknowledged what they didn't know and what they couldn't cure. This honesty was sometimes brutal. No one sugar-coated your prognosis or offered false hope about treatments that probably wouldn't work. Modern medicine, with its emphasis on hope, fighting, and never giving up, sometimes loses this medieval clarity about when treatment becomes suffering rather than healing. Your choice to refuse second surgery and die peacefully, rather than endure futile treatment, offers lessons about the courage required to stop fighting when fighting becomes pointless. But perhaps the most important lesson from your medieval cancer journey involves community response to serious illness. Medieval society, for all its limitations, understood that caring for sick community members was everyone's responsibility. The monastery provided not just medical treatment but also spiritual support, economic security, and meaningful work during recovery. Agnes offered what healing she could within her knowledge system. Even Master Guillaume, expensive and limited though his services were, represented a community investment in preserving lives when possible. Modern medical systems, despite their technological sophistication, often fragment this kind of comprehensive care. Patients navigate complex bureaucracies, fight insurance companies, and face financial ruin while dealing with life-threatening diseases. Your medieval world, primitive though it was, provided something we've lost, the understanding that serious illness is a community crisis requiring community response. The medieval relationship between healer and patient also offers lessons for modern practice. Brother Augustine treated you as a whole person with agency, dignity, and the right to make informed decisions about your own body. He explained procedures, acknowledged limitations, and respected your choice to refuse treatment when fighting no longer made sense to you. Medieval medicine's integration of physical and spiritual care reflects an understanding that human beings aren't just biological machines requiring repair, but complex beings seeking meaning, purpose, and transcendence, even in the face of suffering and death. The monastery's approach to your care addressed body, mind, and soul simultaneously, something modern medicine often delegates to separate specialties that don't always communicate effectively. Your story also illuminates the relationship between individual suffering and communal knowledge. Your experience with cancer, successful treatment, recurrence, and peaceful dying contributed to the monastery's accumulated wisdom about managing similar cases. Each patient's journey informed treatment of future patients, creating a continuous cycle of learning that honoured individual suffering by making it meaningful for others facing similar challenges. Medieval medicine understood something about dignity in dying that modern medicine sometimes forgets. Death isn't medical failure but natural completion of life's cycle. Your peaceful dying in the monastery, surrounded by community and spiritual support, represents an ideal of good death that transcends historical periods and remains relevant for contemporary end-of-life care. The herbs growing in the monastery garden where your story ends represent continuity between individual mortality and ongoing healing work. Your labour in those gardens, even while dying of cancer, contributed to medicines that would help future patients. This connection between personal suffering and communal healing offers a model for finding meaning in illness that extends beyond individual recovery or cure. 7 centuries separate your medieval cancer journey from modern oncology, but the fundamental human experience of facing life-threatening disease remains surprisingly constant. The fear, hope, desperation, and search for meaning that characterized your battle with the gnawing wolf echo in every modern cancer ward, though expressed through different medical vocabularies and cultural frameworks. Medieval hope was necessarily different from modern hope, more accepting of limitations, more focused on dying well rather than living forever, more integrated with spiritual preparation for whatever comes after earthly existence. Your hope evolved throughout your illness, from desperate hope for any cure, to realistic hope for successful treatment, to peaceful hope for meaningful dying when treatment failed. Modern cancer patients navigate a different landscape of hope, one shaped by statistical survival rates, clinical trials, targeted therapies, and the cultural imperative to fight disease with every available weapon. This modern hope has achieved remarkable victories. Many cancers that killed everyone in your medieval world are now routinely curable, and even advanced cancers often respond to treatments that can extend life significantly. But modern hope also carries burdens that medieval hope didn't face. The pressure to try every possible treatment regardless of cost or suffering, the guilt associated with giving up or choosing quality over quantity of life, and the difficulty of accepting death in a culture that views medical intervention as moral obligation rather than personal choice. Your medieval journey offers perspective on these modern dilemmas. Your decision to refuse second surgery wasn't giving up but choosing wisdom over desperation, dignity over futile struggle. Medieval medicine's acceptance of mortality as natural completion rather than medical failure provides framework for modern discussions about when aggressive treatment becomes inappropriate suffering. The relationship between individual agency and medical authority has evolved dramatically since your medieval world. Brother Augustine explained procedures and respected your decisions, but within a framework where physicians were assumed to know best, and patients were expected to accept professional judgment. Modern medicine emphasizes patient autonomy and informed consent, but sometimes creates paralysis of choice when patients must make complex decisions about treatments they don't fully understand. Medieval medicine integrated physical treatment with spiritual preparation in ways that modern secular medicine often avoids. Your care included confession, prayer, community support, and preparation for death alongside surgical intervention and pain management. This holistic approach addressed human beings as complex entities with spiritual as well as physical needs. Modern medicine's separation of physical and spiritual care reflects cultural changes towards secularization and specialization, but it sometimes leaves patients facing existential questions without adequate support. Your medieval example suggests that addressing spiritual concerns isn't just religious comfort, but essential component of comprehensive healing, regardless of specific religious beliefs. Listen to the ways language shapes experience of illness. Medieval people spoke of the gnawing wolf, the crab that grips with claws, and demons eating flesh from within. These metaphors emphasized cancer as external enemy attacking otherwise healthy body. Modern language talks about fighting, battling, and beating cancer, metaphors that emphasize active struggle and personal responsibility for outcomes. Both linguistic frameworks have advantages and limitations. Medieval metaphors acknowledged cancer as foreign invader, but sometimes implied magical thinking about causes and cures. Modern metaphors emphasize agency and hope, but can create guilt when treatments fail and shame about losing battles against diseases that aren't really responsive to willpower or moral virtue. Your medieval journey suggests alternative metaphors that might serve modern patients better. cancer as biological confusion requiring correction rather than enemy requiring defeat, treatment as gardening that requires patience and acceptance of natural cycles rather than warfare demanding victory or surrender, death as completion rather than failure when medical interventions reach their limits. The economics of cancer care have changed dramatically since your medieval world, but fundamental issues about access, cost, and resource allocation remain constant. Medieval treatment was limited by available knowledge rather than ability to pay. The monastery provided sophisticated care in exchange for labour, and even expensive surgeons like Master Guillaume offered payment plans based on future harvests rather than immediate cash. Modern cancer treatment often involves financial toxicity that can bankrupt families even when medical treatment succeeds. Your medieval example raises questions about whether advanced societies should tolerate systems where economic status determines access to life-saving medical care, and whether community investment in healing represents moral obligation rather than charitable option. The role of community in supporting cancer patients has both expanded and contracted since medieval times. Modern medical systems provide sophisticated treatments that medieval physicians couldn't imagine, but often within impersonal institutions that treat diseases rather than people. The monastery's comprehensive approach to your care, medical treatment, spiritual support, meaningful work and community integration offers models for modern patient-centered care that addresses whole persons rather than isolated medical conditions. Your peaceful dying in medieval monastery, surrounded by community and engaged in meaningful work until the end, contrasts sharply with modern tendencies toward medicalized dying in institutional settings that prioritize technological intervention over human dignity. Medieval understanding that death is natural completion rather than medical failure offers wisdom for contemporary end-of-life care that sometimes prolongs suffering in pursuit of impossible cures. The monastery garden where your story ends continues blooming 7 centuries later, though the specific plants have changed and the knowledge they represent has evolved beyond medieval imagination. Modern oncology can trace intellectual ancestry back to physicians like Brother Augustine, who preserved Greek medical knowledge through medieval darkness and maintained traditions of careful observation, honest communication, and compassionate care that transcend specific medical theories. The herbs you cultivated, opium for pain relief, willow bark for inflammation, mandrake for surgical anesthesia, led directly to modern pharmaceuticals that serve similar purposes with far greater precision and effectiveness. Morphine, aspirin, and sophisticated anesthetics represent evolution rather than replacement of the medicinal plants you grew with your own hands while dying of cancer. But the monastery garden represents more than pharmaceutical development. It symbolizes the continuous human effort to transform suffering into healing, individual mortality into communal wisdom, and present limitations into future possibilities. Your labor in those gardens, even while dying, contributed to healing traditions that continue serving cancer patients today. Modern cancer centers, with their sterile environments and high-tech equipment, might seem completely different from medieval monastery infirmaries, but the fundamental purpose remains identical, providing refuge for people facing life-threatening disease, offering whatever healing is possible within current knowledge limitations, and maintaining hope while acknowledging mortality. The best modern oncologists, like Brother Augustine, combine technical expertise with recognition that treating cancer requires treating whole persons within their family, economic, and spiritual contexts. They understand that cure isn't the only valuable outcome, that relief from suffering, maintenance of dignity, and peaceful dying, when cure becomes impossible, represent medical success rather than failure. Listen to the echoes of medieval wisdom in modern palliative care, hospice medicine, and patient advocacy movements that emphasize quality of life alongside quantity of survival. Your choice to refuse futile treatment and die peacefully with community support pioneered approaches to end-of-life care that modern medicine is still learning to implement effectively. The monastery's model of comprehensive care, treating body, mind, and spirit, while providing economic security and meaningful work during illness, offers blueprints for modern healthcare systems that sometimes fragment patients among multiple specialists who don't communicate effectively with each other or address human needs beyond their specific expertise. Medieval medicine's honest acknowledgement of limitations provides perspective on modern tendencies to promise more than current knowledge can deliver. Brother Augustine's straightforward communication about prognosis, treatment options, and likely outcomes offers models for modern physician-patient relationships that balance hope with realism, optimism with honesty. Your medieval journey illuminates persistent questions that medical advances haven't resolved. How do we maintain hope while accepting mortality? When does aggressive treatment become inappropriate suffering? How do communities support members facing life-threatening illness? What constitutes meaningful life when cure becomes impossible? These questions don't have definitive answers, but your story suggests approaches that honour both individual dignity and communal responsibility. Medieval medicine's integration of physical treatment with spiritual preparation, individual care with community support, and technical intervention with acceptance of natural limits offers wisdom that transcends historical periods. The monastery bells that marked your dying continue ringing 7 centuries later, calling communities to gather, pray, and support each other through life's inevitable challenges. Modern cancer patients, despite technological advances that medieval physicians couldn't imagine, still need the community support, spiritual preparation, and acceptance of mortality that characterized your medieval care. Your story ends with death, as all human stories ultimately do, but the knowledge you helped preserve and the example you provided of facing cancer with courage, dignity, and realistic hope continues serving patients whose cancers are far more treatable than yours ever was. Medieval medicine couldn't cure your cancer, but it provided something perhaps more valuable: framework for dying meaningfully within communities that honour both suffering and transcendence. The herbs growing in monastery gardens today represent evolution of healing traditions that connect your medieval experience with contemporary cancer care. Modern oncology has achieved remarkable victories against diseases that killed everyone in your medieval world, but the fundamental human experience of facing mortality while seeking meaning, community, and peace remains constant across centuries. Your medieval cancer journey offers modern patients and caregivers lessons about courage that doesn't deny fear, hope that accepts limitations, and community that transforms individual suffering into collective wisdom. These lessons remain relevant regardless of medical advances because they address aspects of human experience that transcend technological capabilities: the search for meaning in suffering, the need for dignity in dying, and the possibility of finding peace even when cure becomes impossible. The monastery garden blooms eternal, growing medicines for bodies and wisdom for souls, transforming individual mortality into communal healing, proving that even in medieval times, especially in medieval times, some victories over suffering transcend victory over death itself.